or is it okay? Because
very few people are there.
Branch Secretary, CA Anirban Pal, Land Speaker, and Senior Member of the Profession, CA Ganesh Balakrishnan ji, Past Chairman, Senior Members of the Branch, my dear committee members and other dignitaries, good evening and welcome to all for this technical session on non-compliance with the laws and regulations and taxation issues in the advising to the auditee clients. As it is the tax audit time for all the members, and compliance part is very much crucial as the members are doing attest function. And compliance with the different statutes like company laws, accounting standards, standards on audit, PF, ESI and other allied laws is very much essential. And to have a more insight on this topic and also advising on the auditees, we have with us CA Ganesh Balakrishnan ji from Hyderabad. Sir, heartily welcome, sir. Now I request Branch Treasurer CA Sridhar to introduce speaker of the session to the August gathering.
Good evening, dear members. It's my pleasure to introduce CA Ganesh Balakrishnan sir to the evening seminar on the topic NOCLAR and taxation issues in advising to the auditee clients. CA Balakrishnan is graduated from Osman University and is a fellow member of the ICAI. He is also a qualified CMA and he is also certified public accountant from the American Institute of CPAs. Currently, he is serving as partner in the audit and assurance practice with 3 decades of experience and is the office managing partner of Messrs. Deloitte Haskins & Sells LLP for Hyderabad office. CA Ganesh Balakrishnan heads the learning and development for the South Asia cluster for Deloitte audit function. CA Ganesh is part of the IFRS faculty with the ICAI for all the in-house and open house programs and serves as a faculty of Dun & Bradstreet for their programs on IFRS and US GAAP. He is the co-opted member of the research committee of the ICAI for the year 2015-16. He was a co-opted member of the research committee of the Institute's Southern region for the year 2009-10 and was the co-opted member of the Auditing and Assurance Standards Boards for the year 2010 and 11. He has been involved in the preparation of implementation guide on materiality, sampling, and going concern released by Accounting, Auditing, and Assurance Standards Board. He is associated with the Quality Review Board and Peer Review Board set up by the ICAI, the Indian accounting regulator on technical review of accounting firms. He is a regular faculty of the Board of Studies for ICAI in imparting web-based lectures to the students. He is presently associated with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College and Bhavan's Vivekananda College for review of syllabus in accounting and commerce. He has undertaken IFRS training for the Osman University faculty. He has presented papers on various forums in India and abroad at universities and other professional bodies on IGAP, US GAAP, and IFRS. With these few words, I introduce the speaker to the August gallery. Over to the speaker, sir.
Thank you very much, Vice Chairman and Secretary. And a very good evening to everyone. I do understand the tax audits, CPRs, everything is very important to one another. But more important is also for us to be aware of the changes that are coming through with the changes in regulations. Of late, I'm also seeing some of the sessions on how to avoid arrest under the Companies Act. This is the first time somebody is talking about arrest and all of this. And I think to what extent an auditor can do and what extent an auditor can protect is something which we need to start revisiting ourselves. Are we, whatever we have been doing in the past, parledle, evaru chustadu, evaru check chestaru, evaru enduku adugutaru. If you are in that mode, don't be surprised. Once this clause 44 goes as part of your tax audit report before 30th of September, and if there is a mismatch, and if you have not qualified or if you have not verified any of this information relating to clause 44, specifically to GST, you will start getting what is called as notices or explanations from the department. Is there something to be scared about? The answer is no. But is there something to worry about? The answer is yes. Because what is important for all of us to understand that when somebody certifies an information, they expect us, and especially tax audit, being true and correct. So they expect us to be compliant. So the reason why I drifted this is because since the Vice Chairman did mention about many people being busy with tax audit. Please do not accept any clients in the last day of on 30th or on 29th, not in this week, because you will not have time to go through the entire spectrum of clauses and then do a tax audit report. So this is the word of, I would say, a recommendation. May not necessarily be a word of caution, but a recommendation, because end of the day, what you sign is what comes back to you if you have to explain to it. The second aspect of it, which I also want to cover about it, and is about the lot of these cases that have gone through because of incorporating of companies. You would have heard in the recent past about many of the 400 Chinese companies, of which 200 chartered accountants were involved in these type of incorporating companies. The ICAI has issued disciplinary notices to many of them. So the point is, chinna company kada, we can go ROC manavade kada, very incorporate chestam ani anukunte problem em ledhu. Just imagine yourself that if you have to set up, you have to go and open up a simple savings banks account in a bank, which is not known to you. The first and the foremost important thing which they ask you is know your client, all your information related to that. So be mindful. This is another aspect of it where these issues relating to compliance of laws is coming. The third aspect of it, which is right now under discussions with the NEFRA. NEFRA is questioning every aspect of the auditing standards, which you will all hear it out shortly, because NEFRA themselves are going through this training sessions. And once that is done, they are coming up with some sort of advisories to many of the auditors and audit firms. Included in that is also the NEFRA has come up saying that many of the Indian firms or many of the chartered account firms have not submitted their form NEFRA 2, form 2 and all of that. So there is another issue that is coming up saying that which are the companies which are covered in NEFRA if they are not submitted, and those would come firms which have not submitted may likely would face sort of restrictions in doing the audit of certain types of entities. So be mindful of it, because if you are dependent on C&AG audits, if you are dependent on IRDA audits or bank audits, one of the prerequisite is you should be, apart like your peer review board, you need to also provide information to NEFRA. So this is the most important aspect that you need to be mindful of when you're dealing with it. And lately, what is happening in terms of, if you have seen a recent report from NEFRA that one of the firm has been, or a chartered account firm has been prohibited with a penalty. So therefore, slowly, what is going to come through from this is only the beginning. So they will start with the larger ones and then slowly get into the smaller ones. So why this is important and why this non-compliance to laws and regulations important now and why it was not there before. If you recall in 2019, when this the whole code of ethics got revised and it got implemented from effective 1st of July 2020, the whole objective of this is to be aligning ourselves to what is called as the International Ethical Standards Boards of Accountants. The whole objective is to align with them. And we will go through in terms of understanding as to how the alignment has been getting done. For us to understand that what we write I don't know how many of us pay attention to whatever we write in an auditor's report. You take any auditor's report, you would have said, we have complied with the ethical principles issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Every audit report that you have said, you will state this. And if you say that you have complied with it, there are various rules and regulations that you need to comply within that, the ethical principles. We had 2009, after that the revision happened in 2019. That's the 10 years gap, that's where it is. In that exclusion of 2019, when it became effective 1st of April 2020, one of the aspects which was excluded was section 260 and 360 of that ethics rules which they got changed, especially relating to non-compliance laws and regulations. And why this is very important is, in the revised code of ethics, they brought in a distinction. No longer they are using the word chartered accountants. They are using the word called professional accountants. When you have professional accountants, again, they made a categorization between professional accountants who are in service and professional accountants who are in practice. So therefore, there are two components that they've got. And what is the significance of this professional accountant in service? Especially if you are holding a position of a CFO or a professional accountant in a large company, which is basically a listed company, then the rules not only apply to the accountants who are the CFOs, but also applies to those members who are members of Chartered Accountants, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. So therefore, it is applicable to them also. It is no longer, it is those people who are practicing, this is applicable. It is applicable. But for those people who have been in the service, who have been excluded in the past, now get included. That means if you're a CFO, if you're a controller, if whatever it is in a large company, which is covered under the listed entities, then you would get covered under this clause of professional accounting. So NOCLAR becomes a critical aspect. The other aspect of it which were excluded is having taxation services for those audit clients. That means excluding those taxation services. If you were to see, there is a significant push which is going through from both ICI and also representation saying that why don't you only apply to larger firms? Why don't you apply to smaller firms? Which is rightly so, because majority of the professionals in India or chartered accountant professionals in practice in India have double up the role of a statutory auditor as well as the role of a tax auditor or a tax representative, whatever it is. But the thin line of difference which one have to understand is that whilst it is a short, it is not a long-lived story, it's a short-lived story. It may not be applicable now, but if anything goes wrong tomorrow, it becomes applicable to everybody. So therefore, all it is when is it starts becoming applicable. Then the other aspect which they excluded was this getting the fees of more than 15% from a single client. Therefore, they excluded this aspect of it, saying that, hey, listen, for all the small firms, it may get impacted. So therefore, we would want to defer it. So these were the three clauses which were deferred when it was got implemented effective 1st of July 2020. So let's look at the changes. And again, I'm saying it could be an interactive because with more and more digitization, which India is going through, ICI is going through, it's important for all of us to sit and understand. So let me take you through what are the principles, because this is a very important aspect of it. One need to understand, while the definition is written, we always knew when we used to pass the CA, we used to be given that green book. We used to get that after they pay the membership, we are very happy. We get the certificates, we get this ethics book. What do we do with this ethics books? Take this book, put it somewhere, because we don't even know when we are planning to use that. Unlike in the CPA, if you have to get a license, you have to pass the ethics exam. Otherwise, you won't get a license to practice. So in India, that is not the case. I don't know when it will come through, but if it comes through, then it becomes a very critical aspect of it to make it very, very important. Now, the whole objective, whether it's a moral policing, whether it's a moral principles, whatever it is, end of the day, this is a code which is applicable to all the chartered accountants who are in practice. And who are in practice, whether you're doing an attest function or you're doing any other function, assurance function. So both the attest as well as the assurance functions that you do, this becomes very, very important. If you're doing consulting work, if you're doing any other work, this is not applicable. These are predominantly applicable because where you give and certify and give an opinion, it becomes a very, very important part of it. So therefore, be mindful of when I talk about audit and assurance, it's entire thing. If I give a concurrent audit, even there it will be applicable because it's an assurance engagement. So look at from that perspective. Now, so let's put this way, what has happened, what has changed? Somewhere down the line, both at the government level, at the regulator level, the confidence on chartered accountants has been going down. You might say, no, sir, we are partners in national building. We were the first people who went and did GST. We were the first people who go and do all of this. But our issue always been that we wanted extension. And if you look at it, whenever it was a tax season, it always starts with an extension, thinking that they will give you an extension on 31st of July 2359. Same is the case of September 30th, they will give us on 2359. Today, all they are saying is, when we are talking about technology, why should there be delayed? So the question then really comes up is that, are we preparing our client to be ready beforehand? Or the client walks into us in the last minute and says, listen, sir, I need to file my tax return. I need to file my GST return. I have to file my TDS return. I have to file my this. I have to deduct my tax. I forgot my tax. I forgot to pay my provident fund. I forgot to pay all this. I don't know how many of you know about it. Every system of ours is now linked. If you take a PAN number, you will get this information. You take a Aadhaar card number, you will get all this. If you give a DIN number, you will get all this information. You take anything is linked to everything. Why? Take a mobile number, it will list down everything as to where you have gone, what you have gone. Go to any hospital. With your mobile number, it will give you the history when you came, last came, what you did, how you did, what it is. So in the era of technology, what has really changed is the changes in which regulations have been implemented. What has not changed is our professional behavior. We as professionals have not evolved our behavior to match with those required under the changing laws. And I think this is introspection we do when we talk about the importance of ethics. Again, when we talk about ethics, we talk about its principles, its standards, its relationship that a professional accountant has with his clients, with his employers, with his employees, with the fellow members, with any person in the public. And I think that becomes very, very essential. Of late, ICA has been coming, has been reworking out. And in fact, if you see the audit quality milestones model, which is your AQMM, will become applicable effective 1st of April 2023. Why that has become very critical for all of us? Because when you start looking at it, you are trying to measure your quality of work, the quality of the report, the quality of your documentation, the quality of information that is included in the financial statements, the quality of inputs that you get from various stakeholders, and the manner in which you present is what becomes whether you are competent enough to certify a financial statements. Better the quality, the better is your rating. And therefore, when that gets published, similar to what you have today, the peer review board that you have, only when you have peer review certificate, you'll be able to do it. Now, even if you see the peer review board, even if you see the FRRB, the Financial Reporting Review Board, all of them have evolved. More and more cases are becoming instances where it is becoming more and more stringent, and therefore what is important is for all of us to scale it up. So code of ethics plays a significant role, whether it is the SQC, the standards on quality control, whether it is complying to the rules and regulations given under the professional or the code of ethics code, becomes very, very critical. The journey started sometime in 1963. So far, it's been 12 times have been revised. But the last time that got revised was in 2009, after which it was only after a gap of 1 decade, it got revised in 2019-20. Why this is very, very critical is because you need to understand that till about 2009, we were having our own profession of ethics and we never used to look at it. Then came the introduction of IFRS. At that point in time, it came up as to how do you then measure yourself when you compare with those in the rest of the world. It's the first time when the 11th edition of the Code of Ethics got revised, which had the alignment with the ISBA. With ISBA is nothing but the International Ethics Standards Board of Accounting. Now, if you look at it, in India, it is divided in Part A and Part B. Part A predominantly is driven from the international code. Part B is more driven from domestic laws, which is like your CA Act, Companies Act, IRDA Act, all of that, council decisions and all of that. So therefore, it is categorized between these two. And if you see between 2009 to 2019, we had 2013 Companies Act, we had various changes that came through. We had the evolving of NEFRA. NEFRA became a significant part in all of us. And therefore, all of these alignments required that your code of ethics got revised, and that became a significant aspect. As I mentioned, these are all effective 1st of July, 2019. And it is important that it is because of the code of ethics, that was the reason why they made sure that this got deferred. The maximum extension that is applicable, for which the ICA has not come back for extending, is 30th of September 2022. The extension that was given between at every point in time was only up to 30th of September 2022. In other words, all of these may be applicable effective 1st of October 2022. We have to also wait and see if there is any changes coming through. Suppose some flood comes, some festival comes, or something comes, or an election comes, maybe that time it might get deferred. Or you might say, keeping in line with the changes proposed by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, we would want to align it with this. Therefore, we are deferring till such time that becomes a law. So it all depends. But at this point in time, all of these stand to be implemented from 1st of October 2022. And many of them have already started in terms of it. See, one of the reputational challenges with the Institute also had is that the more number of times you defer it, the more challenges the Institute have to respond when something comes up in the media. So what are the changes that have come through it? The most important change, I said, responding to non-compliance of laws and regulations. I will be touching upon each of this aspect of it. While our standards on auditing under SA 260 requires us consideration required in terms of laws and regulations when you do perform an audit. So therefore, it becomes very, very critical from an SA 260 perspective. What are the considerations that an auditor has included while conducting an audit of us, while carrying out an audit? So therefore, keeping that in mind, we will look at it. The auditing standards were there, but how does this non-compliance would impact us? So that is a much more specific ask from the Code of Ethics perspective. Again, if you have 15% of the fee consecutively more from a firm, which that means, for instance, you had about 10 lakhs as, let's say, I'm just saying an hypothetical situation, 10 lakhs is your audit fees for the year. And if you find that out of this 10 lakhs, one client pays you about 2.5 lakhs or 2 lakhs. So 15% of it is 1,50,000. That means if you get continuously from any client more than 1,50,000, therefore it becomes a very important aspect of it to report to those charged with governance. The report to those charged with governance could include your management, senior management who would be there, your board of directors, if you've got independent directors, all of them. This is not applicable if it is less than 5 lakhs and if you have to exclude all those fees coming from the PSU. The other aspect which has been brought in and which is very critical is in respect of providing taxation and management services to audit clients. If you are an auditor, you cannot be filing the return. You cannot be issuing a transfer pricing report. Because if you're doing work on behalf of a management, you will not be able to carry out this. Whilst there is no much clarity which has not come through it, but the thinking is, if you are doing management role, you cannot be doing. If you're an auditor, this is applicable only those companies where you are an auditor. If you're an auditor, you can't be doing management role in terms of your transfer pricing, filing of your return, representing in appeals, all of that will not be included. Now, what they've also done that they've distinguished between independence requirement for audit and independence requirement for any review engagements, review and assurance engagements. Why is this is important is for audit, there are stringent rules and regulations one has to follow. For an assurance engagement, while you may still follow the same principles, it need not be very stringent. And if you would recall that situations wherein you carried out an audit, internal audit, suddenly you were given the statutory audit. Now look at this aspect of it and why this is very important. You're playing the role of an internal auditor. Suddenly the statutory auditor has resigned. The company comes back and says, sir, meer ella internal auditor kadandi, why don't you do the statutory audit? Idi vere kan cheskondi. The question then comes up is, if there is a breach of independence rights, ante, suppose your appointment comes in the month of 30th of September. Let's assume that's the AGM date. You've been the internal audit from 1st of April to 30th of June and from 1st of July to 30th of September. You've been doing the internal audit. Because the statutory auditor is not going to do, the company comes back and says, hey, listen, we will appoint you as our statutory auditor. Why don't you take it? You also are happy, you also take that. The question then comes up is an independence breach which happened between an internal audit and a statutory audit? If the answer is yes, this is where you need to have a clarity. So therefore, duty of accountants for any unintentional breach of independence. But knowingly if you have done, then it is a problem. You cannot do it. Now, the other aspect of it which is being studied by the institute is in respect of, see, more and more, the institute is also moving ahead from saying that, hey, listen, we've been small. Let's talk about being big. Being big is very important because being small is fine, but being big is also requires you to policies, procedures, consistency in the manner in which you carry out work, quality of clients that you may have. And one of the dream project of the Prime Minister is saying that he wants to see the Indian firms to be the biggest, larger firms. And rightly so, that is addressing it. But the fundamental principle, how do you increase it? It is not that tomorrow I will come back everybody and make saying that you are the biggest firm. So it could be through a network firms, it could be firms, it could be individuals within the firms. There are some things which becomes very, very essential. The use of professional accountant, I've already talked about. Let's look at substantially what are the differences. If you look at the difference of the code between 2009 as well as revised 2019, first definitely is your NOCLAR. The NOCLAR was not included. It is included in 2019 code. The second most important is in respect of restriction of taxation services. There was nothing like that in the last, but now it will come as a part of it. And what are those? Tax return preparations is not an issue. Tax calculations for the purpose of preparing accounting entries, tax planning assistant resolving disputes. So all of these will come under what is called as restrictions. Prohibition of management responsibilities, there was no provisions. Now the management response issue. So therefore, if you're a statutory auditor and preparing the books of accounts, this is called prohibition of management roles. Because in our auditor's report, what do? We say these financial statements are financial prepared by the management, management are responsible for providing all this. And you say our responsibility is to an audit opinion. This is where the issue will come through in respect of it. The other change which has come up is in terms of restriction on fees from an audit client. From a 40%, now it's gone down to 15%. And this is something which becomes very, very critical. Again, the discussion is on for any changes. Now, duties of an accountant in respect of an unintentional breach of accountant, there was not breach of independence requirement. There was no such requirement in the past, but in the revised code of 2019, you have to comply with the rule 4A and 4B, basically especially relating to compliance to standards. Now, independent standard requirements I already mentioned to you. Now there's a distinction between audit and review engagement and other assurance engagement. And the definition similar to what we have auditors report changed to international auditors report. Now even the independent standards have become international independent standards. Now, one other change which has come through is in changes in the advertisement guidelines and central council guidelines. Now, earlier there was no specific code mentioned relating to sharing of firm details during interview not to result in publicity. Now, you cannot be sharing any such publicity, provided that you can use your names and for the purpose for which you're debating. For instance, when the budget comes, you don't go and say that, we are representing this, we are doing this, we are this. It only talks about that analysis, budget analysis you're doing, without really focusing as to who you are. Now, I think with the social media which is happening, this is outlived. I don't know how many people see this, whether it is in, let's take a simple example. You're conducting the professional words accountant, right? Or let's say you're conducting a session in Visakhapatnam, the vaulted town. And you say that, once everybody came, published, so people came, chief guests came, all the top dignitaries were there. Next day they came and into the photograph, they showed your name, everything. Now the question is, when you look at all of these aspects of it, have we complied with the independence and in terms of the advertisement? Or let's say somebody opens up an office and says in the Facebook saying that today I was very, very happy to open the new this one. These people came and blessed. I thank all my people, my supporters, friends, and all of this. Is this in the nature of an advertisement? It is something which we need to think through it. Whether should we not expand the horizon of, because no one will come to you merely because you have advertised. Advertisement is only in respect of a product. The person uses the product, does not like the product, he throws away the product. So I think whilst there are rules and regulations, more and more focus should be given in respect of the specific information relating to the advertisement in various media. Now, the distinction between the 2009 and 2019 is the use of a terminology called key audit partner. A key audit partner was earlier not included. So what used to happen? Even today, if you see in Vizag, let's say there's a very big firm. A big firm, you have a very senior partner. Because of this rotation rules and all that, what you do is, sir, I will be the engagement partner. But every discussions has to have the discussions by my senior most partner. So I'll say X was my senior most partner. So the question is, this was never included because in the code of ethics, it's only the engagement partner's name was included, not the key audit partner. And you will find more and more in such cases where you have this informal setup where you say, I will not be signing, but I'm your managing partner, right? So now the key audit partner have been included to include such other partner who are involved in the audit, but their name do not get included as the engagement partner, your concurring partner, or any other partner. So therefore, the key audit partner becomes very, very critical here. So you need to understand this. To whom are these applicable? This code of ethics is applicable to a listed entity or Any entity which has been defined by the regulation or legislation as a public interest entity, or which the audit is required to be carried out under that legislation, where the independence audits. Therefore, if you have to comply an audit under the RBI Act, this will be applicable. IRDA Act, this will be applicable. GST, this will be applicable. All of this gets included there. So therefore, it is important that both banks and insurance will be included as public interest entities. So therefore, this is a very critical aspect of it. So as we talked about volume 1 and volume 2, ISBA basically talks about the use of a terminology called professional accountants. So the chartered accountant have been replaced by, under the code of ethics, as professional accountants. And who is he? He's an individual member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and who has been complying with the CA Act of 1945. Moving to next one. So let's look at focus on the code of ethics. And the reason why I'm going slow is because when you're in a virtual environment, if I rush it fast, it will be very difficult to listen. So therefore, if in case if it is much slow, please let me know. I will increase the speed. So when we talk about ethics 2019, we are talking about principles of ISBA, which is predominantly driven by the ISBA of 2018. Domestic provisions that I talked about, the volume 2, which talks about Companies Act, Chartered Accountants, this one, RBI, and all of this. And the volume 3 is basically what are the disciplinary cases that have been decided so far. So when it comes to the overall structure of Code of Ethics of 2019, you need to understand there is a part 1, which is applicable to all the accountants. So therefore, this application is to all the accountants if you're covered under part 1 of volume 1. Then the part 2 is basically the part which are for those professional accountants who are in business. That means these chartered accountants and all of them in practice. And part 3 are those people who are in public practice. So who are these people? Sorry, in the accountant business are basically people who are employed, not working. So part 3 are people who are in public practice. Who are these people? All the chartered accountants in practice, and these are the chartered accountants who are in part B are basic, or part 2 are basically nothing but chartered accountants in service. So again, if you look at this categorization in the part 3, as I said, you have distinguished between audits and reviews and independence for other assurance engagements. But more or less, both looks the same, because between independence for audits and reviews and assurance, there are no significant changes that has been brought in. But remember one thing, this code of ethics revised is applicable to whether you are in practice or whether you are in service, and especially for those people who are in listed entities. Now, what are the issues? What are the fundamental things that we need to be cognizant about it? One of the fundamental focus on of this is that every professional accountant, now no longer we will call them as chartered accountants, we'll call them as professional accountants. They shall comply to the code of ethics. So that's how the standards, the section starts. Talks about integrity, talks about objectivity, talks about professional competence and due care, talks about confidentiality, professional behavior. If you have done SQC 1, Standards on Quality Control 1, as a part of the ethics, whether it is integrity, whether it is competence, whether it's confidentiality, whether it's objectivity, whether it's behavior, everything gets covered. And what is important for a professional accountant is to identify whenever there is breach of code of conduct and evaluate the significance of that breach and the impact on the firm or on the practicing unit or the professional accountant to comply with this. I think this is very, very critical for you. So the fundamental principles, when we talk about FE, we talk about the fundamental principles. If we are not able to comply, any professional accountant who is unable to comply or is not complying to the fundamental principles that are governed under section 110, 1111, 222, 333, 445 is called to be non-compliant to this particular framework, and therefore there are penalties that have been talked about. At some point in time, you will have why are these also very important from a conceptual framework? Because you will have circumstances where you might be operating with what is called a threat of non-compliance. So every professional accountant should make sure that he identifies what is the ethical issue, he evaluates what are the options that are available, he addresses and implements those which are compliance with the professional, the fundamental principles that are provided in the ethics code. When you apply this, definitely there is a matter of exercising professional judgment. You need to be alert for every information that comes to your attention, and inform in case if you are in doubt, make sure that you're in a position to evaluate this through a third-party verification. Conceptually, if your fundamental principles are complied with, and if you have exercised appropriate professional judgment, and you continuously have this alerts and all of the changings that are happening in the environment, and if anybody carries out a test, you will be in compliant to all of this. So therefore, it becomes a very critical aspect. So what are the circumstances in which, if you were to see from a threat perspective, if one way to be applied, look at a self-interest threat. A self-interest threat is which will influence the professional judgment's behavior. A self-review threat is basically nothing but being there for a longer period in time. And advocacy threat, that means you say, my client is this, my client is selling this product, my client has built this real estate, can I go in this? That's the advocacy. Familiarity threat is basically, I've been with the client for a long time, so therefore I'm free. And intimidation threat is basically where, if suppose somebody puts you under pressure to get things done. Because in a situation, what happens? We always are the people who say, this client will not commit mistakes. This client will not do this. So therefore, you always have this review threat saying that, no, this CFO is very good. No, this managing director is very good. He can't commit. These sort of self-review threats have to be excluded. Not only this, you have a self-interest because your behavior itself is such that you want to pay money and get back money. I think that is something of behavior you need to be mindful of. So therefore, a threat to compliance with the fundamental principles is that you need to be looking at self-interest threat, self-review threat, advocacy threat, familiarity threat, and intimidation threat. And all of these five are very, very critical and essential. So whenever you deal with such threats, right, the first and the foremost thing is through consultation process. You have a senior partner, consult. You have any other partner, consult. If you've got somebody else who is your friend in some place, please consult. So evaluation should be done through what is called as evaluation at threat at an accepted level. What is the foremost thing for any of the people who are working with you or any of the clients that you're dealing with? Is your leadership ability with an ethical behavior. You always give importance to the behavior, you always give importance to timing, you always give importance to the system, you always are free to report any issues which without getting influenced. All of these becomes very, very critical. Most important thing is that if you receive any consideration which is contrary in the public and you address that, that also becomes a very critical aspect of it from a threat behavior. If you receive certain new in results during your audit, you always have an issue which will be from the client saying that, no, don't come to the last time. All of this we'll see next year. It piles up into huge issue. Therefore, you should start looking at it. Are there anything that will eliminate your threat to an acceptable level? Whether it's the circumstances relating to relationship that can create a threat, or applying standards to reduce the threat to an acceptable level, or declining or ending the specific professional activity, believing that this is not in compliance. If you do all of these, it will be looked at from that perspective. So therefore, these are some of the safeguardings that you need to do. As I mentioned, that when you look at a part 1 and again a part A, part B, you have got classifications between those where you deal with the client or those which you deal with what is called an assurance standards, those where you look at each of this aspect relating to audit services provided or assurance service provided. All of these becomes very, very critical. So therefore, from a considerations when you look at it, whether it's an audit or a review or an assurance, you need to make sure that you're independent all throughout the time, which is under the standard. Make sure that you have got the professional skepticism, trust but verify. Always ensure that you comply with the fundamental principles which has been divided under the ethics. So when we look at the professional accountant in service and what are the things that we should be looking at? We should be looking at applying the conceptual framework. He should not allow any conflict of interest. That means he should not appoint his brother as his auditor. He should not appoint somebody. You're managing yourself, but you're let's say running a trust, but you appoint your firm as auditors. All of these are not allowed to be included as a part of the ethics related. The other important aspect of it is it's important to that whenever there is a relation to preparation and presentation of financial information, make sure it does not relate to misleading of systems. And it's a very, very critical aspect. You have to ensure that anything related to this information, you should not be resulting into misleading. That is the reason why it is important for those professional accountant in service to be mindful when you are preparing the service or preparing a financial statements. These should be such that it does not tantamount to any fraud. The other aspect of it which you need to be very important, that if you are a professional accountant in service, make sure that your knowledge does not lead to a misleading to your promoter, to any one of them. So therefore, this also you should act with sufficient expertise. So therefore, applicable to everybody. If you've got conflict of interest, so therefore remove it. Always make sure that you present this financial information in such a way that it is always true and correct. Make sure that you're acting always with sufficient expertise. And this is the requirement that is expected from a PN service. Now, let's say if I have a PN service, what do I have with me? I have the financial statements, I have the treasury operations, I've got the provisioning, I've got the disclosures, I've got a host of things. The professional accountant service should not and shall not manipulate anything related to financial interest, compensation, incentives related to, for instance, I'm a CFO and I've been given saying that if you get me a profit line from a 1 crore loss, if you get me 5 crores, I will give you about 2% more as your increment for the increase in the differential between a loss making to a profit. So what you do as a chartered accountant, as a professional in service, you say, okay, fine, don't make this provision, accrue this income beforehand, don't book this expenditure. Wherever there's litigation, remove it and make it as contingent liability. And you do all of these. This tantamounts to manipulation of information. Manipulation of information is very, 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 very critical from a perspective of non-compliance. The other aspect of it is very, very, very important. And now that Dussehra is coming, Diwali is coming, you have this habit of giving gifts and offers. If you give and provide a gift as a part of the festivity, it is generally not considered to be improper. But no, I will invite somebody to play a cricket match. I go to income tax department, I give them a host of them, I host all of that. For everything, for winning against that, I give them a cup. I may give them a food, I may give them a something. Are these in the nature of improper influence? The answer is yes. So therefore, we need to be mindful about it. It is not about to everyone is fine, but to few is a challenge. Responding to NOCLAR, I will take you through in more detail. Pressure to breach the fundamental principles. We should not always say, okay, fine. Somebody might come back and tell you that what is their internal audit, you give it to your brother, he will sign it in his name, you do it in your this firm's name. Or internal audit do it in a firm's name, individually you do it on a sole proprietor. Should never allow yourself to be under situation of breach if you're complying to the fundamental principles of the code of ethics. This is the most important aspect of it. Why I'm going slow, because it's more important for you to understand concepts than the slides itself. So therefore, so when you look at the non-compliance with laws and regulations, I don't know how many of you know, there are more than 4,000 laws and regulations in India. Starting from central, within central, you have many, you have GSTs, you've got STs, you've got a TCS, you've got TDS, you've got income tax, you've got transfer pricing, you've got domestic, you've got cess, you've got various things which are there. So assuming that you're dealing with so many regulations on a regular basis, whether it is a municipal authority, whether it's a local authority, whether it's your district, whether it's your Gram Panchayat, whether it is your rates and taxes, whether it is your customs duty or excise duty, you do whatever name it comes into. Could it be even pollution control board? Could be Factories Act? Could be your Shops and Establishments Act? Could be anything related to, let's say, import duties. It could be also, now the recent one is your PLI schemes. All of these would be covered under this non-compliance with laws and regulations. A simple instance I gave you was incorporating a company, also will get covered. So non-compliance to laws and regulations becomes a critical part. What is that section 260? Refers to any act of omission or commission committed by a client or employee contrary to prevailing laws or regulations. So you had a rate, you want to buy piece, you went ahead and then said that, we had these challenges and therefore we've agreed there's nothing to agree or disagree. We paid an amount of these things. We disallowed an unexplained expenditure. We have disallowed this, added the unexplained income. You've been the auditor for, let's say, right from the beginning. Your client goes and accepts saying that for the past 5 years I made a mistake. This is my mistake. This becomes a critical issue relating to it. So recognizing the situation will be difficult and stressful, but this should help you to guide. So therefore, be mindful of compliance with whether it's your company law, whether it is a filing of return, whether it is TCS, whether it is TDS, whether it is your PF, whether it's your gratuity, whether it's your ESI. You take anything, will all get covered under this non-compliance to laws and regulations. At the moment, it is applicable to listed entities, to applicable to audit assignments, and especially in service for those people who are in listed entities. Somebody might say, this is applicable to listed companies, audit assignments, and in relation to the employees of listed entities. So therefore, it becomes very, very important. So that means if you are an auditor, this becomes, and this is especially only compliance to section 260 and 361. The rest of the things are applicable to the entire fraternity. Now, when you look at NOCLAR and the scopes and regulations, there is also important that for all the professional accountants, you need to have adequate training and expertise. That means if you're doing the audit of a jewelry, let's say you go to any jewelry and you're verifying it. In a jewelry, if you don't understand what is the extent of copper it goes, what is the extent of any of the metals that goes into creating a jewelry, and if you do not know the wastages and all of this, then it becomes a very difficult thing when you're signing off this. Or why I'm saying signing of accounts, because when you do inventory valuations or when you do whether it is in line with, whether it is only an accommodation that you've done with somebody else, whether there's a nexus between all of this becomes very, very important. Laws and regulations disclosures are very critical from a financial reporting perspective. For instance, If you see some part of Srikakulam is always in news for some fire has come here, some accident happened in pharmaceutical, some companies, this thing, ECG is a big issue, all of that. Now, when you have such situations, you need to look at it from a compliance perspective, from a disclosure perspective. You need to be very, very clear. The other important aspect of it, if there are any fraud, corruption, bribery, money laundering, terrorist financing, proceeds of crime, securities markets, and trading, all of these will be covered under non-compliance to laws and regulations. In India, it's very difficult to take out the fraud, the corruption. But in India, it is easier to fix a chartered accountant who has not complied to this by issuing a statement or by telling him that he has not done anything. I think we need to start thinking through it, that we should not take any responsibility related to any matter. What are the other salient features? Things which are inconsequential are not included. If there is any personal misconduct, that is not included. Non-compliance relating to other than governance is not included. In other words, when we are looking at it, we are looking at it from a perspective of there's a law, there's a governance, and then you need to be compliant. For instance, if anything related to a listed company, you need to comply with the SEBI regulations. If it's anything related to PF, you have to comply with the PF rules. If anything related to GST, you need to comply with the GST. Personal, between people, all of this does not get covered because these are not related to business. If it is in business, therefore it will not be included. Now take a case. You may encounter a situation when you're in service, and this is a very important aspect that they've brought in, especially for those people who are in employment. So you might encounter, so you are an accountant, you're a professional accountant, you're working there, and you come across, there are certain things which are non-compliance, which may have a direct impact on the financial statement. If that is the case, then your responsibility as a professional accountant is to inform the superiors. Just imagine, you are not in a CFO role, but you are a professional accountant, like let's say controllership, and you have come across certain things which results into a non-compliance, which could have an impact on the financial statements. It's your responsibility to report to your superior, and therefore it becomes a very critical aspect. So therefore, the responsibility of a professional accountant is on the principles of integrity and professional behavior, alerting management, enabling them to rectify, remediate, or mitigate, always deter any of those non-compliances, and seek further action. And that means there's so much of responsibility that has been bestowed on the professional accountant who is in service. That means you have 10 chartered accountants who are working there. Every chartered accountant service who are involved in this process should make that issue and make it alert, and therefore that becomes a compliance issue. A non-compliance with laws and regulations, that means the professional accountant employing organization, those charged with governance, management of employing organization, other individuals, any other requirement to report to an appropriate authority, and any prohibition on the alerting the relevant party. Now, what's important is you may have certain situations, but your non-compliance to laws and regulations includes omission, commission, intentional, or unintentional. Everything gets covered. Nak telvadandi, nak chudledandi, petledandi. Omission, commission, intentional, or unintentional will be included as a part of this. What are the responsibilities of those employing organization management? They are supposed to make sure that they identify and address any non-compliance, including those members charged with governance, you need to make sure that this is reported. As I said, the responsibility of all professional accountant in service, you are supposed to address this non-compliance where it is appropriate. So it being appropriate becomes very, very critical aspect of it. See, again, one of the things we should understand, we are not auditors for the shareholders. We are not auditors for the promoters. We are auditors for the person who actually gets benefited or gets lost, the person who could be a common man. And that is the extent of where you need to look at from that perspective. Now, what are the responsibility of senior professional accountant in service? That means if your junior comes and reports, you need to come back and make sure that you have appropriate controls in place, deploy and make sure all of these gets heard. That means no issues goes unresolved, and that is the extent of what a senior professional accountant in service should do. It's also important for him to evaluate if there anything which is contrary to what has been given under the code of ethics. And it could be discriminatory sometimes. It could also have certain potential consequences, especially when it relates to people and who are involved. So under the section 260, it says, whenever you receive such thing, the professional accountant that means the senior professional accountant should say, okay, listen, these are my team. The team come back and told me that these are the issues, these are fraudulent issues, and therefore these issues is what I'm bringing to your attention. So the board can say, hey, listen, you are the management, why I bring it to us? But you being professional accountant service, hey, listen, this is the code that has been getting implemented. This is my role, this is my responsibility. I need to discharge my responsibility by bringing certain aspects relating to non-compliance, that is, communicate with those charged with governance. So those charged with governance becomes very, very important. Also, what is important, that what are the disclosures that you need to make both to the management and to the people who are working with you. That is also very, very essential. That means you don't have to put your photograph, but you need to respond to those provisions which are contrary to what you would have thought before. So this is a very critical aspect. When is that the further action is needed? Because it's important the senior professional accountant shall look at it. It should be timely. You can't wait for long for somebody to do it. You should take immediate steps to get it addressed and disclose appropriate with appropriate authority. So therefore, these are some of the things which one should look at it very, very closely. So I'll just pause here. Are there any questions? I know I've been going on for more than an hour. Any questions? Just to do a check. Just to also do a check whether people are still there in the call.
Sir.
Any questions so far? Anything has come or any clarifications required?
Members, if you have any doubts, please switch on your mic and ask your questions to our speaker.
The problem in a virtual presentation is you don't know whether the person is listening or the person is put only on that.
Sir, sharing knowledge data in WhatsApps and all, will it come under misconduct, sir? Like due dates?
Sharing knowledge means, give me an example, sir.
Yeah, a tax audit due date is 30th September, like that.
Those are information, sir. That is not knowledge.
With firm, sir, at bottom line, there is firm name.
And that's all fine. See, sharing this thing saying that due date is only saying that was at one place you may look at from an advertisement perspective. Are you advertising? Unsolicited advertisements. But if it is your normal procedures which you go saying that, hey, listen, the client comes back and says, please provide me the due date. So please, many of the firms do it. My take on all of this, sir, is that we have outlived this in the social media era. I think everything is advertisement. So what is the big thing? If I go on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter and I put it saying that I don't even give my, saying that for all the people for immediate this thing, I've not addressed to anybody. Leave all this. My firm is, we wanted to have some recruitment of some people, so I put it on the Facebook, social media. Or leave all this. Today we had a great session in this place, and I put all my photographs saying that a great session from the GST, great session this. I had the best of the speakers. It is my clients have hosted. Tell me, is it an advertisement or not? So I put my hotel photographs, I put my press photographs, I put my everything, and say, this is I've got thing, got. I thanking everybody. Is it an advertisement or not? I'm saying in today's media, we should allow chartered accountants to advertise. Merely because you're advertising does not mean that you are people will come to you. Oh, I love you guys. You're great guys. I want to give you business. Avinash, this is the business for you because you have advertised. People will come to you only when you have got knowledge and the ability to service that client. So advertisement should be off. That is, I've been telling people that time that you remove this advertisement thing, because see, the whole worry is always been not that the advertisement is lost for this. The whole worry is that if you allow advertisement, the big people will get away. So therefore, we should not allow them. I think we have outlived this generation. This whole thing is outlived. So therefore, it is important for us. I always talk whenever I talk to all these people, these past presidents and all who come. I said, remove this advertisement. Allow people to advertise in whatever way. Don't say that I'm the super expert in this thing. No, you demonstrating your capabilities in such a way. I think that is what. Otherwise, in today's world, you'd see in many of the movies, this accountant, chartered accountant firm they'll give. I don't know how many people watch that, but their names are there. So the question is, and you go to debates, very renowned speaker, expert in this thing, GST, tax, this one is coming here in direct tax, transfer pricing from this firm, put your name and firm name and then say, and next day, what do you do? Sir, today see my video, sir. It is very, very well, sir. We have deliberated. What is it? If you say these are not advertisement, then what is it? Somebody has released somewhere, you have not watched, oh, you have watched my TV, I didn't know. That is not advertisement. But you yourself circulate to whole world and say, boss, I was appeared in this TV for so many times. Look at time between 116 and 220. During time, my deliberation, specific points relating to these topics, please get this covered. So the point is that in this social media, we need to be clear. See, what happens is that today, when we talk about global world or a global village, we are talking about even service as a global service. You can sit, you can interact the way I'm interacting. Let's say you're in Vizag, I'm in Hyderabad. I want you to services, I want you to provide. I'll tell you this is what it is. And you'll say, send me on this mode, video mode, you might send me in a link or whatever you host it in a cloud. And I deliver it, you give it, and you're done. So I think time and again, we need to be very, very clear as to where we want to be. And I think for all professional accounting, we need to start rethinking our strategies as to how do you take your services to this system? How do you take the services to the next level?
Sir,
Okay. Yeah. Right.
Prakash, actually, sir, we create profiles in LinkedIn. It is a professional networking profile on social media. Whatever the information you put on LinkedIn, the profile and like work experience or like whatever it is, deliberations that we did, or speaker, etc., those things, will that constitute an advertisement?
No, it is not an advertisement, because there what you're doing, you're putting yourself, your profile for a job. Why do you go to a LinkedIn? You don't go to a LinkedIn just because that, you know, I'm going to offer this. Because in LinkedIn, what happens, who looks at your capability, your service, your this thing on. So basically, that is a tool wherein you look for a person who is like your, so you're saying, I am the person, I have done this. I have to have some recommendation to say, nothing more than that.
Yes.
I can't recommend myself and say I'm the best. I may give me my profile, I'm a partner, I'm this, that, and that. Beyond which I can't do anything. I
Okay.
cannot, and who are the people who looks at it? It's all those people who are seeking jobs or who are giving jobs or who are from the industry or from somebody else. Nobody has spotted there and said, sir, I saw your picture in LinkedIn. I want to give you a business of 1 lakh rupee because I saw your, nobody's going to give.
Okay.
He might say, sir, why don't you come and join us? He might, instead he might say, why don't you come and join us? So this aspect of it becomes very, very critical. So that's why I'm telling you is that when the social media is opened up, you might attribute LinkedIn is also an advertisement. But the restriction of LinkedIn is that you will only rest with friends. Not everybody will be able to see it unless you go through the premium where they sell yourself in a much larger.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. No, the reason I just wanted to bring all this interaction is because I just want to make sure that everybody is with me. Otherwise, it'll be talking to the wall against the wall. All right. So why I'm saying is this is very important is, see, I always look at it something which is much more different from a lens, which is critical. That means, see, what is evolving is what you need to be cognizant about. Somebody might say, sir, this may not be applicable to us. No, it is applicable. Because it's slowly, because with technology changing, everything becomes applicable. So what is important for all of us, we can't be saying that, a professional accountant can't be in such a situation where he will be closing his eyes and saying that, I will defraud bank, I will do this, I will not submit stock statements, I will not do. Just imagine. I don't know how many of you really know about it. Submission of you see, in the Caro, the new clause which came in many cases, apart from your registration, apart from title in the owner's name, whether apart from whether it is your survey, one important aspect they brought in is also about whether the information that is provided to the bankers in the term of any working capital loan or working capital finance, whether it is as per books and records. Now, if you are a chartered accountant and then you're certifying that accounting, and here's the person who is the professional accountant in practice, he is submitting that information. You have to be very, very cognizant about what you're providing to him. Because if you're providing any information which is incorrect, the professional accountant in service runs into a problem, and the chartered accountant who's certifying that also runs into it. So therefore, be mindful as to what you're certifying, and especially to all the chartered accountants. Please do not certify. Please do not certify without following the procedure that is written. And therefore, it is critical for each one of us to look at much more closely. So non-compliance is not only from a practice, non-compliance is also for those people who are in service. So this is very important. Second thing is consult. Consultation is very, very important. You should always consult if you're in doubt. And if you need be, take a legal advice relating to it. Because why this is important is non-compliance to certain things and larger things happens. And it results into certain things which is not in compliance with it. It actually comes a responsibility first on the professional accountant service and the professional accountant in practice. Take the instance. Any frauds that happen, today, the chartered accountant in practice is only held responsible. The chartered accountant in service may be held in a very rare instances. But today with this code of ethics, and if he's certifying, so another issue which is coming up is people are not paying membership. So therefore say, I am not a member, why should I be complying with this ethics code? You may ask a question, which is a very valid question. But these are very, very critical from a perspective of when you're dealing with especially loss and compliance. And again, I'm telling you, please go back to your clients, please go back to your team, tell them that compliance is the first responsibility of the management. Second, take the entire dump of what laws are required to be complied by this company. Read the entire one. Third, wherever you have got issues relating to it, consult. But if you're not understanding, please consult. I think this becomes very, very important. Now, when you look at there's an immediate breach, right? First and the foremost of immediate breach is a disclosure. If you become aware as a professional accountant in service, and if you think that this is very important, you are supposed to exercise the judgment and report on the breach. Now, this is the most important aspect of it. I don't know who gave this idea. Even for a company, when you are non-compliance to a laws and regulations for a professional accountant, the senior professional accountant is supposed to document the matter, results of discussion with their accountant superiors, including those charged with governance, how they have responded to that matter, what is the action that they have taken, and how is the accountant satisfied that is complied with section 260. That means you know the matter, you took the matter, discussed the matter, got a resolution, and how it got disposed of. Just think through this. This is going to be the most toughest thing for an accountant, a senior accountant in professional accountant in service. That means he has to document all of this as a part of his. Just means if you have to escape, anything goes wrong, you have to bring them. I won't say escape. If you want to address, if there are any things which have not gone right, this is something which an accountant should do. Now, this is in respect of those people who are senior. So senior professional accountant means I'll say it's a CFO. If it's other than the CFO, let's say it's a controller, what is his responsibility? If he comes aware of it, you should first seek an opt-in understanding and then report it. Once you identify that it's a non-compliance, when you have taken appropriate actions should be there. Therefore, at each level, the accountant should keep immediate senior and the next level of authority. And if you still think that is not been done, he can make that statement saying that this is not in accordance. He can write directly to the company or those people who are involved. He also should document the matter, document the results of the discussion with accountant, superior management, wherever, including with those charged with governance, how the accountant senior responded, and what are the actions that are taken. Just imagine, ikkada tappu jarigindi, ee tappuni nenu velli superior cheppala, ayana velakapothe management cheppala, vaallu velakapothe governance cheppala. Whatever is your action point, you have to document it and saying this is what I have. I think this becomes a critical ask from you. That is for those people who are in service. Let's look at it, those people are in practice. And this is a very important aspect of it, because so far there is no law for people in service, as especially the code of ethics for people in service. Now there's a code of ethics for people in service under section 260. Now for the specific relating to those people in practice, this becomes a very critical aspect. Every professional accountant should understand the conceptual framework, which gives you under what circumstances it may threaten your independence, it may threaten your ethics. Look at all the 5 principles that we talked about. Integrity, confidentiality, judgments used, professional competence, due care, right? All of these would become very, very essential for you for a look at a behavior. And these are all accountant is applicable, especially during the course of any listed entities. As I said, it's a very important aspect of it for those people who are dealing with listed companies or those people who are dealing with statutory audits of those entities which are of PIEs. Now, what are the things they have to do? Laws and regulation generally recognized to have a direct effect on the determination of material amounts and disclosures in client financial statements becomes very important. That means every law that has an impact, you should be able to evaluate this, including if they don't have a direct effect, but has got a disclosure that is to be given, whether it could be arbitration, whether it could be a safety inspection carried out, whether it could be a Factories Act that has not been complied with, whether the pollution board has not been, whether payment of gratuity has not been complied with, The depositing of PF dues are not on time. Deposit of checks are not on time. GST where you don't have all of the forms. All of these things become fundamentally from a perspective of non-compliance. And this becomes very, very essential when you're looking at the audit engagements of listed entities. Because ultimately what it says, listed engagements are larger set of people, where therefore there are more people who get impacted than your unlisted engagement. But at the same time, those unlisted engagements also could have borrowed from various people. So indirectly, they also might be impacted because of that. So therefore, look at not only from this, from every audit perspective, if you've got anything, look at it while the restrictions could be at this point, applicability could be on the listed engagements. There's every likelihood it will get included for any of the NEFRA related entities. So what is important? Comply with the principles of integrity and professional behavior, alert the management, enable them to make, remediate and all of that, deter if there are any non-compliances and take appropriate steps. And what do you do? What is your responsibility? The moment you have got the responsibility, you have to address to those charged with governance, which is the client, individual, member, and all of that. And if you became no action has been taken, then there is every situation where you need to bring it in terms of an audit report or any other manner of disclosure, which calls for you to alight that particular investors community or entity or creditors and all of that. Similar to what we have seen in understanding of a matter, the same principles we will apply even for a professional accountant who is in practice. Suspicion that there's a non-compliance, you might become aware of non-compliance, expected knowledge to apply for such non-compliance, inform all the people who are relating to it. In case if you need to consult a legal consultant, once you have done that understanding, then you have to address this matter. Let me tell you one thing. There are many companies which are not complying to accounting standards. There are many companies who are not paying any of this. And it puts the auditor into a very difficult proposition. Let me give you an example of one of the requirements is that loans that have been taken, that have been deployed for the purpose for which is taken, right? That's a very simple statement. Today, we have given a loan to a subsidiary, joint venture, or associate anybody. Whether that loans have been taken has been put for the use for which it has been given is a larger application. And when you find that it is not getting appropriately addressed, you may need to come back and rethink and see, inform the management, ask them to take appropriate. Where you're not able to take any decision, you may consult a law firm. For instance, if there are entities which are prohibited to carry out any work, let's say in Afghanistan, or let's say in any other place like Russia, and you've carried out and you do not know what is the condition of that, there's every likelihood that you may need to seek a legal opinion or from an expert to understand what is the compliance related to it. And that becomes a very, very critical aspect of it. So what is important for all of us as professional accountant in practice, understand the legal and regulatory framework, note the urgency of the situation, have a complete understanding of the matter surrounding it. If you've got somebody else, and if you want to go back to the management and say, listen, this is what you believe is a non-compliance. If there are suspected non-compliance likely to recur, please address it. And by doing this, it is going to result into a substantial arm of entities. It is our responsibility to make sure that we report that. Reporting it becomes very, very critical when you're dealing with, especially those matters which is of consequence. So this is a very, very critical aspect when you're dealing with the laws and compliances. The second and the other important aspect of it, which you need to look at it, in case you believe that even after informing it is not possible for the management to rectify, think about exiting from the client, stating the reasons why you're exiting. I think this is where we need to use our application and judgment to sufficient appropriate audit evidence, where you're not in a position to obtain in respect of certain matters related to laws and compliance. This is a very critical aspect, a step which you need to take and get it addressed. Now, if let's say the management themselves are involved, what do? Your next responsibility is to report to the shareholders. So that's the next step that you need to start looking at it. Or let's say even the shareholders are the same like management. Your next step is to go and report to the ROC if you have been appointed under this or any other law where you have been appointed. But what is important is that if you come across certain things which are critical material and which you believe can have an immediate impact on any of the stakeholders' interest, I think it is appropriate if you're in the role of an auditor to bring this in from that perspective. Now, what should you do? Documentation is exactly the same that you've been doing it in respect of accountant in service. Wherever it is non-compliance, how did the management deal with it? How did those charged with account respond to it? What are the actions that have been taken? What are your responsibilities? How do you deal with the responsibilities? What are the issues? What is the conclusion arrived at it? What are the matters that you discussed? What are the issues that have been relating to non-compliance and how did it apply to it? All of this becomes a critical from that perspective. Remember one thing, documentation is a very essential part of it. Before you think about documentation, you need to have an understanding of the matter. Having understood the matter, you need to understand. You should be the expert. If you have not the if you don't have the knowledge, consult an expert. Take all of this information, discuss with management, take the response, discuss with those charged with governance, take the response. Even if after that you believe that is not there, you may want to resign or you want to exit, or you may want to take to any other authority who has appointed you. And then that's the way you deal with it. So this is where the deferment of NOCLAR tax services came in. In the council, that's where they deferred up to 30th of September. Again, you need to be mindful that it is important that for all of us to say it might be deferred for 6 months, 1 year, but there will be a situation wherein these would come back to us time and again. Now, another aspects relating to the audit clients that when you have more than 15%, earlier it was 40%, now it's 15%. And if it is public sector PSUs units and all of that, public sector units, you may exclude fees from that. So therefore, if you've got 10 lakhs, 15% is 1,50,000, 2 years continuous is 2 lakhs each. You need to make sure that what are the controls that you have put in place, therefore you don't get pressurized by the client to address any of his or provide any of the favors which is contrary to laws and regulations. And this becomes very critical. Please be mindful, because whenever you get a peer review done or anybody comes up for any review, he will be looking at from that perspective to see if there are concentration of clients and whether it runs it enable this. You have to enable the screen sharing. I was just talking. I didn't know that it went off. I don't know from where I went.
Suddenly disconnected. Sir.
You have disabled screen sharing.
Just
Give me the co-hosting rights, no? Yeah, that's fine. I don't know where I lost, but I'm just, let me. I suppose I'm in section 300 to 400. Right? You're able to hear me? Prashant Garu.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I was saying that, we are under no authority to provide a second opinion, right? Because unlike in the Western world where any person can provide an authority based upon whatever knowledge and expert. In India, the only authority who can provide an information is basically, the ICI through their portal or any other legal person who might give a legal interpretation. Other than that, there is no one who could provide a second opinion. Probably in taxation, there is opinions given, but not much in terms of an opinion which comes to who is not an existing client, because generally it is not permitted because that's what it is. But unfortunately, many of us do it, saying that this is what it is. They might provide a position which is contrary to what an auditor would do. So let me share with you an example which happened. The client wanted to take up a tax position. They went to one other firm, and the other firm said, whether I can take. In a tax law, what happens is, unfortunately in India, you have a high court case in Vizag which would have given not in favor. Hyderabad case wouldn't have given in favor of the client. But Gujarat High Court would have given a favor, or Bihar Patna High Court would have given favor. So therefore, this person conveniently uses the Gujarat and High Court and Patna Court and comes back and say, this is what is there, therefore you can take this position. The question then comes up is, where is the domicile of this client is? So if you're domiciled in a state of Andhra Pradesh or Telangana and Hyderabad, you will take this as a preference of it. So therefore, the question is that providing a second opinion becomes very, very critical. And I think that is not appropriate. I think you might use a reference while filing a written, but providing an opinion becomes a critical aspect of it that one needs to deal with. The other important point is, which is very critical, is if you have any of your clients who does not allow you to communicate with existing or predecessor to accept the engagement. He says, audit is done, this becomes a significant issue of non-compliance to ethics. Keep this in mind. It's a very important aspect of it. Please do not accept any audits. Even for tax audits, you need to have no objection certificate, and you cannot get it just like that. And people who are providing no objection certificate, please provide the reasons why you're not doing this year when compared to the last year. Very, very critical. Fees and other types of remunerations can't be contingent fees, referral fees, and all of this. Inducements, gifts, and hospitality. Again, I said it is other than those which relates to your festivities which you give as a part of culture. Other than that, culture or custom. Other than that, you don't do it. The other challenge which has been seen is that, let's say, because many of the chartered accountant firms also write books, there has been instances where the professional accountant did not part the books till such time the client paid the money as audit fees. And that the client went back to ICI and said, filed a dismissal case saying that he's holding my records and not giving. The chartered accountant said, hey, listen, you are looking from a management side. The chartered accountant says, I have not got my fees for 5 years. You tell me what I should do. He's not listening. So the question now is, even for the chartered accountants who are going to take that engagement, if the old fees, if the outstanding fees is not paid to the predecessor auditor, even that is considered as what is called as professional misconduct. Please mark this. If you are taking a new engagement and you have not got the earlier, you have to write to the person whether any of the fees remaining unpaid, undisputed, And if that amount is not paid, you cannot accept the engagement till such time it is said. Not only this, even when you have your own fees not being paid, you will wait till such time the next fees comes. Even that becomes, you should not accept the client because their fees are outstanding. This is a very important aspect of it. Please exercise your right of compliance to ethics. So when we talk about independent standards, because we have classified between audit and review and assurance separately, I will talk about audit and review. Assurance is more or less the same. Independence for audit and review, professional image should be felt, experienced, and visible. This is where we are talking about public trust. It should be both in mind and appearance. You should be independent when you carry out audit. That means the independence rule should be complied with. Whatever is laid down under section 141(3) of the Companies Act. Public interest entity, as I said, which is defined under NEFRA, which has got a particular threshold of a turnover as well as paid up capital. Independence should be maintained throughout the period. Communication with governance network firms are very, very important. You can form part of the network firms, but it's very, very important that you need to look at it. If there are any breaches of independence, steps should be taken to make sure that you address all of this. What is important for all of that when you look at from an independence, any compliances which relates to whether your conceptual framework, whether it is your CA Act, whether it's a CA regulation, council guidelines, whether if there are any other matters that you need to address it. Now, if you look at any of this, when you talk about the fees and all of that, always remember that your fees should be commensurate with the work and size that you pay. You need to not remain, you should also make sure while this has been deferred 15% above, it should be very, very clear that there is no client which is more than 15%. Avoid as far as possible, you make sure that you've got clients which are distributed evenly. If their fee overdue remaining unpaid, this you have to evaluate it on a case-to-case basis. Because this is self-threat, interest, and intimidation threat, you need to look at it. Look at the compensation. You should never be mindful that no partner should be based upon his performance with a KPI because the whole point objective of this is that it should not be driven by any yardsticks or a key performance objective. It has to be based on a perspective of not based on performance, but should be based upon what is the experience in bringing in and how he's delivering it. Because if you have any of the partners, especially including those with the key audit partners who are there, and if you tell them that these partners, key audit partners, are those partners who will sit there, he will sell, and the rest of the person should pay him without getting involved. So this becomes a very, very issue. So be mindful of this, especially because you don't pay senior partner based upon the business he brings, but based upon the whatever he provides is his experience and expertise to the profession, to the service in this. Independence again, gifts and hospitalities have been time and again I talked about. Threatened litigations, you will have situations. There are of late there has been a lot of activism that's happening in terms of threats that are coming from various forums. Be mindful of it. You should not be holding a financial interest. You should not hold in shares. If you're doing an audit, you need to be very, very careful. Make sure that not only you, your team does not hold audits of a listed company shares. Always remain independent. Make sure that all of the independent rules are complied with. Whenever you have a challenge relating to independence, make sure that such independence are evaluated, and if there is a breach, those breaches are addressed. Make sure that you put proper systems in place if anybody breaches the system, including training and educating, as well as in case if the person repeats it, you may have a situation of letting go of that person. I think this is a very, very important aspect of relating to independence. Independence, as much as a state of mind, it is a state of appearance, is also a state of mind, and you need to comply with it on a regular basis. At times, which is an unintentional breaches could happen, but you need to make sure that independence breaches are corrected and appropriate authorities are being informed about that. When it comes to section 900 to 990, again, it lists down to the for the assurance engagements, what you can do, what you cannot do. It says that for assurance engagement, you can't have a business relationship, you can't have loans and guarantees, you cannot have gifts, fees and all of the fees which is lower than what is your capability. You should not have family and personal relationships, employment with any clients. You should not be serving as director of any of the clients. So all of these becomes a very, very important aspect of it, including for assurance. Make sure that include that these reports that you are giving is only with a restriction note. Any questions so far?
Members, if you have any questions, please switch on your mic and ask your speaker.
Because I'm going to go to the next one, which is a volume 2. And the volume 2 is basically nothing, but so far we have covered on NOCLAR, that is non-compliance of laws and regulations, code of ethics. Next is I'm going to cover about what are the domestic laws which is applicable. More or less will remain the same. But one of the things which we need to be cognizant, any non-compliance to domestic laws has a direct impact in the non-compliance to laws and regulations.
Sir, chartered accountant should not take next year assignment if previous year fees is pending, right, sir?
Absolutely. This is actually a rule, because what happens is, if you go and take an assignment, if your fees are not paid, what comes in your mind? Compromise, right?
Yes.
Because you say, okay, fine, మీరు నాకు డబ్బులు ఇచ్చేసి నేను చూసుకుంటానండి. You say, లేదండి, records అని సరిగా లేదు. Can you just look at it? So your compromise comes in your mind because your fees is not paid. So this becomes a self-interest threat. So first of all, what you say, sir, I will do it, plus please pay my money.
Please share that clause number, sir. We'll show to our clients and collect our fees.
No, it is a code of ethics. Go to this part.
Yeah.
No, go to the independence part of it and go to that. Go to section 410 now. Independence, part A, 410 section. Okay. Collect and మీరు కష్టపడుతున్నారు.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
It's like this. Suppose suddenly your plumber comes and water stops. Plumber says, no, sir, మీరు last time fees ఇయ్యలేదు, అందుకే ఈ time నేను బ్లాక్ చేశానంటే. So that's how it is today's world. Get paid first.
Yes, right, sir. Long pendings are bad debts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sir, మీరు హైదరాబాద్ లో ఉన్నారు. You can tell. We are in such a place we cannot tell. క్లయింట్ 2-3 years వరకు ఇవ్వకపోయినా మనం ఏంటి అనలేం. ఏమంటే రిలేషన్షిప్ పెరిగిపోయింది. మీరు హైదరాబాద్ లో ఉన్నారు. You can tell.
Sir, very important point, sir. The law is not applicable only to Hyderabad. Law is applicable to even Vizag.
No, law is applicable. Practice is according to the locality. Law is applicable to all, sir. Practice is according to the locality.
All I'm trying to say is localities will change going forward. Mark my words. There has to be a change.
Yes, that is right.
And if we don't start practicing the change, then there's no point. I'm telling you, sir, when the laws and non-compliance laws and regulations, the biggest issue which we are facing.
Yes, sir.
ఏమైపోతుందంటే మీకు చిన్న ఉదాహరణ చెప్తాను మీకు. రేపు మీరు జిఎస్టిలో మీరు క్లాస్ 44 లో సరిగా ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ ఇవ్వలేదనుకోండి, రైట్? మీరు క్లయింట్ అంటారు, సార్ అన్ని మీరే చూసుకుంటున్నారు కదా సార్, మీరే ప్రిపేర్ చేస్తున్నారు, మీరే చూసుకోండి సార్. యూ పుట్ సంథింగ్ అండ్ దేర్ నోటీస్ కమ్స్. హూ ఇస్ ద ఫస్ట్ పర్సన్ టు బి టోల్డ్? Who is the first person to face?
Auditor.
Not the client. Auditor.
Auditor.
అప్పుడు నేను చిన్న క్లయింట్ పెద్ద క్లయింట్, చిన్న లొకాలిటీ పెద్ద లొకాలిటీ ఎవరు చూసుకోరండి. The maximum number of cases which are emerging out of is because they have linked GST, they have linked income tax, they have linked every other law, including SEBI, to this. So therefore, it becomes a critical aspect. Never ever take a place. I'm telling you, the simplest thing is an NEFRA issued a case for a simple person living in a small area, right? For him, he might say, anyway, 2 years pote pone nak 2 lakhshalu petadani petesna. That is the starting point. So please don't go by place. Suddenly the place becomes big. So important is educate. Importance is to tell the, see, this is where I would want each one of our professionals to understand and appreciate that today, if you get an assignment and if you do not take a no objection letter, in that no objection letter, if you don't write as a person outgoing auditor saying that because of this reason, I'm not doing it, the incoming auditor's responsibility is to respond to that part. But unfortunately, what happens? Even there is no objection letter, immediately you start the work and close it out. I'm telling you, there's one company, one firm.
Even if you write, some people are not responding.
Correct. No, but the point is, it says R8, registered post acknowledgement due. RPAD. You send by mail, you send by RPAD, and then come back and keep that as part. That's fine. You have done your job. But the fact is, if this auditor was not done, it is his responsibility. So he has not complied with his ethical principles.
Yes.
That are specific auditor. So he has to deal with separately. But fundamental principle ekatavalante, mano ilanti issues avutunnai ani mana respond cheste, we will be able to deal it. Otherwise, what will happen, sir? We will run into a problem. It's a very
somewhere it has to start.
It will start.
Somewhere it has to start.
It will start, sir. Start out with, sir. Endukante compliance is such a word that people don't want to buy it. What is the cost of compliance is much higher than the cost actually following the compliance. So all I'm trying to say is small or big, large or medium, everyone is a professional. The degree is different. Complications are different. But I'm saying if you have to coexist, this is what it is. Today, laws and compliance is not come in this. Tomorrow, a banking person can come and raise. For instance, let's say charge is not created and you have put it in the auditor's report, it says, we have not disclosed that information. I'm responsible as a statutory auditor. I'm telling you. This is the first year where your CARO has undergone change. Where the statutory auditor is also commenting on end-use certificate. Whether it is for bank, for financial institutions, whether it is for given to loan subsidiaries, anyone. So to that extent, what becomes very, very. So the next volume that I'm going to talk about is basically the volume about compliance with accounting standards, auditing standards, engagement and quality control standards, and those notified under the Companies Act. So every chartered accountant in practice should comply with all of these. This is called domestic laws. So the domestic laws requires you to cover for entire thing. I'm not going to get into details, but this is something which you will have to be in line. Look at what he can do, what he cannot do. But the fundamental challenge that we have when you talk about places like Vizag, the issue is relating to it. They might say the person themselves doesn't know about tax. They are not literate. So therefore you have to prepare it. That is what institute is also looking at it to say that, you know what, maybe these people do not have that knowledge. So we may need to look at it much more closely. Certification of practice, again said, prohibition to use other than CA. You can't say CA advocate and CA practice. It is only CA means CA. And whatever you're permitted is what you can do it. You cannot do anything other than that. You can't use chartered accountant, you can't use company secretary like that. You have to say CA or ICS, ACA, ACS or ACMA, whatever it has been given. Again, membership, this is all removal and all of this, which I'm not getting to it. you have to practice in the name of the proprietor or in the name of this. You can't say I'm practicing as chartered accountants. You won't sign as this. You'll sign in the name of the firm or individual as the case. Falsely claiming to be a member, I think this 1,000 and 5,000 is outlived. We should make it 1 lakh, 10 lakhs, 15 lakhs, something like that. Because if suppose somebody claims to yourself to be a member and is actually not a member, how are they going to penalize it? While this section is there, earlier there was what is called certified auditors, like your compounders, right? Or your registered RMPs, the registered medical practitioners. You used to also have auditors who used to certify that way. I think those are the things which are outlived. Now we need to be clear on this part of it. And no other person other than a chartered accountant can sign. If you're a partner, he can sign. If he's a manager, he cannot sign. This is a very important aspect of it. Nobody can sign other than one who is authorized in its professional capacity. Maintenance of branch offices, if it is within the same city, it's with a radius, within a particular radius you cannot have, but after beyond a particular radius you can have a branch. For instance, in Mumbai, you can have at different levels. Professional misconduct is again what is given. Again, members in practice, members in service. Part 1, first schedule and second schedule. Part 2 is for first schedule for service. And part 3 and part 2 is for members in general. So all of them gets covered as a part of it. So these are, again, I'm just as a process, I'm running through this part, but again, these are all, you cannot allow any person to practice in your name. And this is a very serious offense. Many chartered accountants who are working abroad or elsewhere, what they do is they have a COP to get a bank audit or get any other audit. What they do is they will give it to, they say that I'm a partner here, and therefore they lend their name. It is like something like a medical shop where the medical person who runs the shop is different from the person who holds the license. So this is something which should be deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct. And if such professionals are still doing it, I think this is something which is very, very important. Nobody should lend a name and nobody should misuse that name. I think these are two very, very critical part of it, which one has to look at. Again, you can't pay any commissions or something to those people other than a member of the institute. Again, this is, you cannot share. You can't say that, you get me business, I'll pay this money. That is not allowed. You can only, it's because of the multidisciplinary model that been recommended by the institute, you can have this part of it. Percentage of fees is not allowed under certain circumstances. It is allowed, whether it's a registrar, whether it's tax valuations and all of that. Certain times, there could be widow as a part of the partnership deed. That was also included. Again, there are certain cases which was against and which was for. Other aspect of it which is there is that if you are a member of, if you're, let's say, employed in any of the non-profit organization, you cannot be auditing the same thing. So there's a prohibition relating to that. This I touched upon. Multidisciplinary firm, partnership firms. Encourage yourself to be in the multidisciplinary partnership, because the more the number of people, the better it is. Again, it's a partnership of mind, so therefore be mindful of that, because at the end of the day, it's not money also, it's very important. If you have to grow big, seniors have to sacrifice, juniors have to use their experiences and build it up with their wisdom and knowledge. I think that's the way we should look at it very more closely. Again, there are certain things which is work. If you're securing it through any other means, you should not be. And this is something which is very, very critical. Do not use a non-chartered accountant, and especially people who uses this, advocate. There are certain this practicing advocates where they get many of the chartered accountants sign the tax audit reports. These are something which you should is prohibited, is against ethical practices. Soliciting clients directly and indirectly, again, I'm saying, whilst there has been a case where the institute had given a guidance saying that if it is where the fees details are given, you can quote. Where it is not, you're not supposed to tender it. I think where there are non-CAs, you should not supposed to tender it. I think it's very fair, because you can't be competing with an MCOM or a BCom as a professional chartered accountant. So I think that's a very critical aspect of it. Publication of books and articles, you can print what is permitted is CA before and what is there. But as I said, these things are outlived. We need to start revisiting some of this. Sponsoring, again, I'm not sure to what extent sponsoring is valid, because sponsoring is, again, if you see many of the events that happens, if I know the client is in, I'm going to host, let's say in Vizag, I get all of my clients to it. So I think sponsoring is something which is little challenging. And especially if you're involved in any of the teaching of coaching institute, restrictions to the number of 25 hours in a week, you can't put a board saying that this is what it is. You can state these are subjects that you're teaching, but not necessarily something which is a very huge thing. I would recommend that, if you put yourself, but today, if you see in social media, SFM classes, auditing classes, these classes, grade classes, you have so much of things which happens. And I'm not sure how much is relevant is whether the members may put a board or not. Nobody's looking using a board. These days, most people are going through online. So online, everywhere it is available. You don't have to advertise. If I know a friend, you keep circulating it. One circulation, it goes to multiple circulation with your name and all that. How do you determine you're teaching only 25 hours in a week? These are something we need to be mindful about it, but very critical aspect of it. Televisions, claims, soliciting, and all roving inquiries, all of this. Again, it's very important that when you're going, see, a big should not take away work from a small, medium should not take from a small. If anybody comes to you for seeking an advice, do not make sure that you take the client themselves by you. So I think it is very important that you respect this process, because against our own moral principles, I won't even say ethical principles, to take away somebody with just this one. Some of the things which, these are all again repetitive in nature, make sure that and one of the things is achievements. I'm not sure appointments, you should not make a reference to personal achievement. I don't know, but just imagine you're conducting a seminar for about 2 days and it is publicized, it's everywhere, and somebody comes and reads your your resume for 2-3 pages continuously. How do you then determine yourself that you're not advertising? I think while it is written, it is against the ethics, but these are something which you should be mindful about. Make sure that these are all something which are prohibited. Avoid even see, I would rather say, how do you introduce someone as a professional? You should say he's a member of the institute, and that's all. It doesn't have to read the entire script. And normally I don't encourage those things, because end of the day, it's the speaker's knowledge that has to be shared, not the resume that has to be spoken about. I think that is something which we need to get away from that, but I don't know when that will come. But definitely important point to be noted. Make sure that, again, there are a lot of things which comes through it. Suppose somebody passes and then you start advertising it. So publicity, it says about the firm articles, but if you see today, every person will go and say, "This congratulations, you've done a great achievement," and you put your name, family name, CA name, every name you put it. I think these are something which is very, very critical. What is not permitted, what is prohibited is not permitted. So therefore, look at from that perspective. Look at the sign of the signboard, but with the virtual working that I have, signboard has got no significance. Some of the people who make announcement as saying that I've become the director of this company, you see any of the Facebooks, you'll find all of that. I become like this. So therefore, what really happens, that's why I'm a very, this is my personal view, that, time that we change all of this. Because Facebook is somebody where we share our personal things. Somebody might say it's a social media, but I'm sharing my personal thing. I've achieved, I went here, I went there, I achieved this. So therefore, it's my personal attainment. How will you come under an advertisement becomes a challenging part of it. But I think this is something which has to be dealt, but I think will be dealt appropriately as a part of it. Use of CA logo, cross tick mark is a very good thing, but at the end of the day, tick is a tick. Just make sure that the logo is appropriate. Don't get caught in somewhere and say chartered accountant place, because chartered accountant names comes very, very visible these days quite often. Most important, communicate in writing. This is the part which I'm talking about first schedule, that before you accept any client, please put it in writing as to what it is, including for this one. Communication required for all types of audits, non-compliance for acceptance of should be clearly stated. incoming auditor, outgoing auditor now is a part of fees pending due to non-availability. Put all of this non-payment of undues. Please look at the first schedule part 1. Please go back to your whoever raises question, go back. There's already there. Now that you should look at it. Premises found locked, new guidance available for those people, especially when you're sending out any confirmation. Premises locked more than twice. I think you can always say that you have sent and that it's not been updated. But this is a very important aspect. Positive evidence of delivery is RPAT, personal delivery, acknowledged by retiring audit using UDN portal. You can even send through UDN portal. This is something which you need to be mindful of. Firm not found it is new guidance. So all of this is repeated. So I'm not getting to it. So unjustified removal of auditors. Again, this is today. If you see, there is this under the CARO reporting itself is the removal of auditors coming through. More and more guidance are coming through. In fact, if you see the recent press meet by the finance minister, she did mention about saying that no auditor can just escape saying that, you know, I want to resign. You have to complete the audit or provide qualification or state as to why you're resigning. So resigning is very difficult. Unjustified removal is also very difficult. So all of this becomes very, very critical. The responsibility rests both with the outgoing auditor as well as the incoming one. These are exceptions for the percentage of commission fees received. Again, these are all something which is there. Again, you can't be a director. You can be a director, but just make sure that you are not a whole-time director when you're in practice. These are something which are generally not permitted. Just if certain things which are generally permitted are listed, but just make sure that you're not an active person. So these are all something which is not so critical. Again, another thing which is very important is that you need to comply with, if there are any misconduct, you need to inform. So these are something which generally be there. Certain things where you've been held as for professional misconduct, there is again not exceeding imprisonment and all of this. These are something which relates to old. With the revised changes that are coming through, again, the NEFRA governs it through the NCLT route. Sharing of information without obtaining client consent is not permitted. It's a very critical part of it. You cannot disclose any document without seeking the permission of the client, and that's a very important part of it. You need to make sure that every certificate that is signed, it is in the name of the firm with the firm membership number, your number in UDN in place. It's a very important part. Most important under SA 299, which deals with joint audit, make sure that the work is divided. Joint audit, each of the joint auditors know what is responsible, who is responsible for what. Do not publish. And this has been seen in the past. If you are a joint auditor, if you're a bank auditor, you want to write something, the joint auditor does not listen. So therefore you release this in your social media. I think these are something which you should be mindful. Not everything you should not go to media. And I think that's a very critical aspect of one has to deal with. But if you're a joint auditor, make sure whatever the work is divided, please get it discussed and cleared. What is not divided, you need to know. Each one is responsible for the entire financial statement. In case if there is a dispute in relation to any of the opinions, you can issue a separate opinion and appropriate disclosure should be made in the financial. Being a joint auditor these days is very, very important role, and that is a very critical aspect of it. Please refrain from any of this profit forecast or financial forecast. You cannot be issuing an audit report. There is guidances which are given unless if it is only a review which is based upon information that is provided, because ultimately it is end of the day, you cannot be vouching for any of the true and fairness of that forecasters. Now, there are changes that have been brought in terms of, you know, when you're a statutory auditor, you can't be an internal auditor. If you're an internal auditor, you can't be a tax auditor, and there's a cooling off period that is required for a director, similar to the cooling off period that you have for an auditor. All of these are very, very important aspect of it, which are not, because these are something which is there. Materiality, again, is a definition which is being relooked at even by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs and how we are using NEFRA from NEFRA perspective. How are we using the materiality and where do we use materiality? These are some things which are very, very critical. Please make sure you document what is materiality and how does it have an impact on the report. Fails to report a misstatement also becomes an issue, and therefore this is again which is getting very, very important. Due diligence is essential for every of these reports that are issued or certificates certified. Again, gross negligence which has been noted. I'm just saying from a professional misconduct, failure to count, physically verify cash or reconcile bank balances, check bank balances, verifying security, false certificate, all comes under what is called as professional misconduct. So be mindful about this, because whatever you verify, whatever you certify, have the documentation in place, because that forms the basis on which an opinion is issued. Generally accepted accounting procedures, again, you have to refer to all the guidances are issued, which are some things which are given by the institute, sometimes by the regulators, sometimes by various concept papers that are released. Peer review certificate, restorations, UDN number, all of that is very, very important. Never misuse any money which is on behalf of the client, because you cannot use the client's money for your personal purposes. Even that becomes into a professional misconduct. These are again certain things relating to disciplinary matters. Again, now with this revised change in the disciplinary, where the government has instituted a body which of all the three bodies, and earlier you had at least a representation which used to be there, where the president used to represent it. Now everything goes as only a representative from each of the institutes. So therefore, this entire thing has undergone change. But I think there are certain still cases which the institute does take it, and over a period of time, it has been doing it very, very fast and quickly, just to come up to the speed. Again, the authority is what revised based upon this thing. Again, board of directors and the disciplinary director discipline was actually, to be very honest, it is not the institute fault that they're not able to. It's the availability of the government professionals who are not there to get it. So even in the new body, I think it would be the same challenge with the institute would be facing it. But the advantage is at least we have people who are from the institute who would be represented. So that's all I had from my side in terms of the code of ethics. I will leave to you for the question and answer session.
My dear members, please clarify your queries with our eminent speaker, who is having very good knowledge, and spare time in the tax busy schedule. Sir, we are very much thank you, sir, and I request all the members, please make use of this opportunity. If you have any queries, please clarify with our speaker.
Sir, while applying for tenders, if there is some caution amount or security deposit, are CS allowed to deposit such amount?
Sir, please unmute, sir. Please unmute.
So especially it happens in a government institution where you have that EMD for this thing. So if it is only for chartered accountants and by the public institutions, then they are generally permitted. Otherwise, it is not.
Any other member? Sir, I thought that your deliberations are given much more clarity to our members, so they don't have any doubts and queries. And we are very much happy that in the busy schedule also you have given your acceptance for conducting seminar. Thank you very much, sir. And I request our secretary to propose a vote of thanks.
Very good evening to all the members. On behalf of the members of the Visakhapatnam branch of ICI, and I would like to thank the learned speaker of today's evening session, CA Ganesh Balakrishnan for having spared his time and for having accepted our invitation and for his detailed deliberation on the individual aspects of these schedules and the NOCLAR provisions. I'm sure the members would be benefited in terms of the practice through a thorough understanding of these clauses. I thank you very much, sir, for having spared your time. Thank you very much. And good night to all members. Thank you.